The national flag will fly at half-mast from today until the evening on the day of the funeral of the AmaZulu King Goodwill Zwelithini. President Cyril Ramaphosa declared a special official funeral category 1 for King Zwelithini. The Zulu royal family says that they will meet today to discuss preparations for the burial. The 72-year-old king died of COVID-19 related complications in a Durban hospital. Now, let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by Shalo Mbatha, the Royal Zulu historian and history lecturer at the University of Zululand. A very good afternoon to you, Shalo. Thank you so very much for availing yourself to us here at SABC News today.
Thank you so much for having me on this very sad day, or sad times actually.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I understand you spent quite a lot of time with the Royal King kaBhekuzulu's while you were writing your book. I want us to talk further on the book, but before we do that, I'm sure as you were writing this book and as you spent time with His Majesty the Royal King, during that time there were things you got to learn about the King that perhaps the rest of us as ordinary folk didn't really get to know of the King. And I'm wondering if there's a few of those that you're able to share with us this afternoon.
Yes, His Majesty was very passionate about the future of the Zulu. And when I say the Zulu, he's not just limited to the natural born Zulus, but for everybody who identified as a Zulu person, living in the kingdom and outside the kingdom. And His Majesty also was very passionate that there were our ceremonies and everything that makes the Zulu people be who they are maintained. One of the very burning issues that you like talking about was the element of ilobolo, for instance, the way it's been turned into something that it never was used to be. In the past, people used to, when you went to lobola, you'd offer the family whatever you could afford. But however, in the 18th century, Shepstone, he's the one who came around with the 15 cows. Which His Majesty used to say, now people cannot get married anymore because they'll say, I do not have enough cows. And then he says lobol was never about how many cows. There's only one cow that was very strict, the cow of the mother, but the rest were highly negotiable. So he was starting to have that conversation to say, how do you make sure that our young people get married and stay married? Because one of the biggest issues was the element the yellow ball. And also he was a very warm person, and everybody has mentioned the fact that he liked ceremonies. He was encouraging that wherever we are as Zulus, in South Africa, in the kingdom, everywhere, that we need to fly the flag high by making sure that we stick into our culture. Because he says, a nation that has no culture, you have no point of reference to face the world. You understand? Because other people who speak, whether it's Chinese or Turkish, they are proud of who they are. So we need to push that agenda so that we can get a sense of where we belong and who we are.
Yeah, and I mean, as you know, the king has really been on the throne for a very long time. It's 50 years, the longest serving monarch of the Zulu kingdom, I understand. I wonder if there might be a fear of some of, that history perhaps getting lost. I mean, there's such a great history being sort of lost at this time. But I mean, there are people like you who are keeping those traditional education going, Zulu culture and so forth. But I worry about the younger sort of generation, and it's very easy to find information or get history books on the royal family in England, for example, and I wonder if it's easily accessible for our children here, the young people here, to be able to get that sort of information about their own kings, their own monarchs here in Africa. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I was looking at social media, and some of the things I was really scared to see were, some young people kind of saying, what's happening? Who's died? And that's quite scary for me, because I would imagine that should the Queen of England pass on, there would be a big brouhaha about it. And here we have one of the biggest monarchs in our country, and it seems as though it's not being treated how it should be. I mean, what have your thoughts been as you've watched?
Just there, I think that's what was my biggest impetus to write the history of the Zulu. And I cover 800 years because I noticed that there was a gap. When did I notice this? Very quickly, I was in exile because I left during 76.
Yeah.
When I came back, I realized there's a big knowledge gap. And I dedicated my life over 20 years collecting the information. And I went every corner of the country, every corner, especially of the kingdom, to make sure that I collect and verify everything that was relevant about the Zulu history. In fact, I even moved to the kingdom. I gave everything up in Johannesburg and I moved down there to make sure that I collected, you know. And my book, because it covers 800 years, it's not just about the Zulu kingdom and the lineages. However, I talk about the culture as well, how to treat it one another and our identity. So in that way, I'm hoping that my book can be the bedrock of other books to come. And yes, you are right. They say to me, how, Mam Shalo, what is the big deal about His Majesty? Isn't that person that is God, is living in KZN? Why is he the only king that is recognized by the Constitution? And I said, you see, there's a difference between the Zulu king and other kingdoms. During in Kodesa, the Zulu decided they're going to negotiate for themselves to say, we've been here, we defeated the British in 1879 in Sandrona, we defeated them in 1906, and guess what? And then guess what? The other thing, we also made sure that when we negotiated the Kodesa to say, we fought the last conventional war in South Africa, we need to maintain our borders, we need to be recognized with our history. There was a deadlock, they had to walk away. And then only when the Zulu king said, if you're not going to recognize me and what we've done as the Zulu people, we need to secede and go back to pre-Shagan times and the borders. Only then then they came back to come and negotiate. And that's why he's recognized. And he is the only king in the country that is recognized by the Constitution. I'm trying to say with this that the Zulu are very proud and they make sure that everything that we know as Zulus must remain intact. I mean, take a little kid who's 3 years old, 4 years old. They might not speak a lot of words, but if they've got a surname, like if they're Mbatha, they'll know to say Shandugandab. Yeah. Already the child is being, taught to say, appreciate who you are, so that you go everywhere. And just on a very light note, which is kind of weird, His Majesty used to make jokes and say, when they crowned me to make me king in 1971, guess what? They gave me an appointment letter. He says that appointment letter, I don't know if there was a threat to say, if I don't behave the way apartheid want me to behave, they're going to take it away from me, Yeah. So His Majesty lived through a most turbulent times when we're changing from the tyranny of apartheid into democracy. And he had to make sure that whatever happens at the end of the day, the Zulu nation stands strong, as you can see as it is today. And he also managed that you got the Ngonyama Trust land, because things were moving very fast around Kodesa. There was no guarantee what was going to happen. Even the monarchies were under threat. But they managed that there is going to be land that's set up aside so that the king is the only trustee to make sure that the Zulus do not lose an inch of what they gained. And also the issues of AmaKhosi. He started sorting out AmaKhosi. Remember, the apartheid government used to put, if you're a puppet, they'd make sure they make you a king, a so-called king. Yeah. But Isilo made sure that AmaKhosi Oselo, meaning the genuine AmaKhosi, are being recognized. And then those were not. They had the Nhlapo Commission. He was a far-reaching and far-thinking Inkosi to make sure that South Africa is well represented by the Zulu nation in the way that he ran his businesses, And when I say business, I'm thinking about, he started big farms. He started encouraging small holdings so that people are self-sufficient, even in food security, Yeah. So he was very passionate, and I think it's a very big loss that we have. However, I think the people around him, and I'm one of those products that we're going to make sure that whatever he taught us and whatever he encouraged us to do, we do not forget. He wrote the foreword of my book because he thought this is groundbreaking. No one has ever written the book that I've written. And I must say, I'm very proud that the first version was in isiZulu, because I used to say, people say, nobody's going to read it, nobody cares. I said, listen, as AmaZulu, we're talking to one another. Let us first have this book come out. Let's have a discussion. History is a moving target. History is a living document. Now it's been translated into English. Now we can engage other people. But most importantly, the Zulu had to read the book in isiZulu first. And in fact, it was him who encouraged me very strongly and said to me, look, other people need to know we are, And then also don't forget, he's the longest reigning monarch in the world, in Africa, and second, I guess, to somebody else overseas.
You talk about,
that doesn't come easy. He lived a life.
Mbatha, let me come in here. Let me come in here. You know, you talk about, you know, the fact that, you know, Isiko and the fact that people kind of hold on to their culture. And, you know, what I have noticed, you know, in the very many Zulu people that I chat to and have friends of, you know, no matter how modernized a person is, they really do hold on to their Zulu culture. And that has been, you know, very impressive to me in terms of wanting to understand what the Zulu culture, you know, what was done right. And perhaps this is credit to the Zulu King himself, in that regardless of where anybody goes, they hold on to their culture and continue the practices that they would have, even if they were, whether they were in KZN or whether in Joburg, whether in Cape Town, they continue all their traditional practices and very proud and always speak their language, you know, very clearly and properly. And I wonder, should that then be a credit to the King himself, and what did he get right? Because I think it's so important for one to hold on to their culture. I mean, I'm a Pedi girl, I can hardly speak Sepedi, but you know, and that's very bad actually. And I just wonder, you know, what did the King get right? What did the traditionalists in KwaZulu-Natal get right, so that, you know, you carry on your traditions like that?
You see, it is the pride of knowing from childhood what your forebears have achieved. You cannot take that away, Flo, from a small child, knowing that we did this, we did that. And as Tina AmaZulu, this is how we do things, you know. I mean, I'm born in Johannesburg. I'm a Soweto girl, you know. Yeah. And when I was down there doing my research, they used to ask me, hey, is this Zulu Sako? Hi, is that, you know. In fact, they used to call us the Zulus in Gauteng, the Zulu in diaspora. You know, painful as it was, but they understood. And also, the Zulu, because of their history, King Shaka was one of a kind. He taught the Zulu respect, dignity, perseverance, and you must stand your ground. And absolutely, if you get defeated, you must accept defeat and never hold grudges. Because they're saying, Zulu, meaning today you defeat me, tomorrow I'll defeat you. So that there's always that room for Zulus to make room, that there's nobody who's better than the other, you know. And also, I think we also, like you said, as a petty girl, I bet in one time in your life, you did wear Zulu clothes. Because, I mean, no other nation in South Africa has got a day dedicated to their king, which is the 24th of September. Okay, we now call it the Heritage Day, but the reason it was called the Heritage Day because the Zulu, during the Constitution, when they were making those holidays, they said, we are not changing. The Zulus didn't go to work that day. It was a holiday ever since 1828. So I guess the rest of the country to follow. Now, maybe it's a culture day, culture, attire, and they all wear Zulu clothes, and we love it as Zulus. But it just shows that there are people who respect themselves, and yeah, there is Majesty putting all those, making sure that the ceremonies come up, umemulo, you know, all those ceremonies, and it makes the children proud. Like I said, there's a trick in telling a child, it's not enough with gamalako ushalo. You must know Shalo Mbatha, and then you know, once you do that, then you get this natural desire to know what does this mean going. You know, little girls are not allowed to sit in a particular drink water standing up. Now, these are things that get drummed in your head as you grow up. You know, so I think then it fuses into your own children and then into the bigger society, and then that's why you see where Zulus are. You know, yeah. So yeah, it's His Majesty did a lot. I mean, he even survived to see TikTok for all like hey. I mean, when he grew up, there was no internet, there was no cell phone, but he knew that there's TikTok. People must be there. Talk about the Zulu culture, engage people. What can you pick up that's good? What can you throw out that's not there? You know, and also like King Shaka. He wanted new ideas, but that worked and improved the nation, you know? So yes, and also in my new book, I do mention all those things to say we need to love our history. That's why my website is called ilovezuluhistory.com, so that people can go to the website, get more a blessing for me to have spent time with them and imbibe whatever, you know, information and advice that you used to give out. And one of the things also I learned from
All right, we're struggling with the signal. Unfortunately, I could speak to you all day. Unfortunately, technology is not on our side this afternoon. But thank you so much for giving us your time, Mbatha, Shalo Mbatha. She is a Royal Zulu historian and history lecturer from the University of Zululand.